Friendship. We all need it in our lives. Most of us at some point in our lives, either currently or not, have had at least one or two close friends, maybe even a best friend, someone you can relate to, confide in, cry, laugh, and grow with. You think the world of them because they can never do no wrong in your eyes. But do you ask yourself, is this friendship genuine? Or is it a friendship tainted by undertones of hate and envy that's faked with a smile? For Maria Wolmarans, that question wasn't just theoretical. She found her answer in the most devastating way imaginable. This is CrimeBrew with Kgosi Tau-Bantsi. Dumelang, and welcome to the first episode of CrimeBrew, Botswana's very first true crime podcast. I'm Kgosi Tau-Bantsi, and I'm very excited to be doing this with all of you. If there's one thing about true crime which stands out to me, it's the fact that most cases feel familiar, but they're also very different too. And that's what inspired me to start this podcast. Every month, we'll delve into different types of crime, ranging from murders to corruption within Botswana, South Africa, and beyond. And you're probably thinking, why every month? Well, I live a very busy life for a 19-year-old that's about to turn 20. I'm an A-level student, and that takes up about 70 to 75% of my free time because of my academics. And I've also got other big important projects which I want to delve into. So that's why I could only post new episodes of this series every month. Plus, not only will I be here telling you about the events of each case that we'll discuss every month, but we'll also discuss the key players involved, the investigation and aftermath of the case, and my own personal opinion about it throughout the entire episode, with my cup of freshly boiled tea to help me get through this. That's the name CrimeBrew, because we're brewing up stories, insights, and yes, maybe a little controversy too. So grab your own cup of tea, grab your headphones, and let's get started. So today's case is one of Botswana's few highly publicized murders, which was littered with rumors, scandal, and controversy. And at its core is the story of two women, Mariette Wolmarans and her best friend Mariette Bosch. Their friendship had unraveled in the worst way imaginable when one party betrayed another in a scandalous, forbidden manner. This case made history in Botswana for all the wrong reasons, as its aftermath sparked a debate about the harsh punishments of the judicial system in Botswana between Botswana themselves and South Africa, and at some point the Commonwealth, Amnesty International, and the United Nations. You heard me. The United Nations. All of this got politicized because of Maria Wolmarans' fate on Wednesday, the 26th of June, 1996. So let's not waste any more time, and let's begin brewing the murder of Maria Wolmarans. Our sources for today's episode include articles from Mechi, BBC, Time, The Guardian, News 24, and Murderpedia. There's also a 2-part miniseries on YouTube about this case called Justice in the Line of Fire, Motive for Murder. And I would also like to refer to YouTube channels Briefcase and Ghost Nation Stories for covering the case as well. So check out the miniseries and the channels as well. There's also the podcast series True Crime South Africa by Nicole Engelbrecht, which covered this case on its 125th episode. So check her out on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. And finally, there's the docuseries Huisgenoot Wa Lewensdrama, which covered this case on its 12th episode of its 10th season on Showmax. However, that episode is mostly in Afrikaans and there's no English subtitles, but I did the best I could by watching the episode, despite my very limited, subpar Benelandes understanding of Afrikaans. The key players of today's case include the victim, Maria Wolmarans, who will refer to by her nickname Ria, her husband Martinus Wolmarans, who will refer to by his nickname Dini, and her best friend and neighbor, Mariette Bosch. Other players in today's case include Mariette's husband, Justin Bosch, Ria and Dini's children, who are Mariana, Marina, and Peter, along with Mariette and Justin's children, consisting of Anton, Charmaine, and Soné. These names sound very similar. Charmaine, Soné, Mariana, Marina, very, very similar. So, bear with me. Ria's sisters, Anne and Lorette, Justin Bosch's brother Mike, and his sister-in-law Judith, family lawyer Chris Duplessis, who represents the Bosches, and also knew of the Wolmaranses as well. And Ria's boss, Henny Kutsia, are also involved in this case too. The timeline of today's case took place from 1990 up until 2001, with the key event being Ria's murder on Wednesday the 26th of June, 1996. The events of this case, unfolded primarily in Phakalane, which is a prestigious suburb outside of Gaborone, which is Botswana's capital city. Phakalane is like a small town within a city, which is aptly nicknamed Little Sandton, mainly because the area is occupied with many large, luxurious homes, which features some of the best modern architecture in Botswana. I'm talking Property 24, Pam Golding, and Sotheby's impressive. When you go to the website, you take a look at the houses there, and you also take a look at its market value, and you're like, ish, why am I broke? Hey. And typically, these houses are valued at about 1 million pula or more, especially in and around this golf estate, which has got a golf course, obviously, a hotel, and also a convention center as well. So that area is very sought after, and houses there are expensive, and that makes it very attractive to many residents. There's also a few shopping centers in Phakalane called one called Moana Park, and another called Acacia Mall. Now, one fun fact about Acacia Mall is that it is the only mall in Botswana which has Botswana's only 3D movie theater. And in Botswana, there's only 3 movie cinemas, and they're all within Gaborone. So for us cinephiles, we've got a long way to go, but we'll get there. However, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. I've been there many times myself, and the roads going there and the roads in Phakalane are terrible. There's potholes, there's uneven roads, there's traffic everywhere. And according to friends of mine that live in Phakalane, there's also frequent power cuts every now and again. So, at the end of the day, no area is perfect, but frequent power cuts and terrible roads, something's got to be fixed. But despite that, Phakalane has a large expatriate community, with mainly white South African families calling Phakalane their home. And a big reason for that was the effects of apartheid. After decades of apartheid violence and uncertainty, many families in South Africa did not feel safe on both sides. It didn't matter if you were white or black or Indian or whatever. No family really felt safe. And they wouldn't want their children to grow up under extreme, devastating levels of racist brutality. Therefore, many South Africans made the decision to pack up their bags and leave, either because of political exile or to pursue greener pastures in more politically stable countries, which included Australia, the UK, Namibia, Zimbabwe, and Botswana. Many white South Africans found Botswana very appealing, as it was one of the only few successful democracies in Southern Africa at the time, with a booming economy due to diamond and beef sales, and a nearby more politically progressive environment, which embraced multiracialism. One episode that I'll be doing in the future is on the 1985 raid on Gaborone, which was basically a result of the South African National Defence Force, which was pro-apartheid, attempting to do an entire raid on Gaborone, because there were many South Africans who were exiled there, and they were protesting against apartheid, and many people died. That day was bloody. So we'll get into that in more detail sometime in the near future. Anyway, the Wolmarans and Bosch families were part of the wave of white South Africans moving to Botswana in search for a brighter future away from South Africa. However, their lives were tragically and irreversibly altered. The first question we should ask ourselves is, who is Maria Ria Wolmarans? Well, her full name at the time of her death was Maria Magdalene Wolmarans, and she was born sometime between the late 1940s to early 1950s in South Africa. So Maria Magdalene, okay, that's basically an Afrikaans version of Mary Magdalene. One of the women that found Jesus alive after 3 days, being dead in the Bible. And apparently Maria Magdalene was a very common combination of names within the Afrikaans community for girls that were born at that time. But I don't know if that's the case. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have the exact details about the year that she was born, hence the late 1940s to early 1950s prediction, or her childhood. However, we do know about the type of personality Ria had in her life. According to her sisters Anna and Lorette in the miniseries Justice in the Line of Fire, Motive for Murder, she was described as a perfectionist who had a dominant disposition. Ria was the most outspoken, no-nonsense sister between her and her siblings, but got along with them and the rest of her maternal family nonetheless. At some point in her youth, she would meet the man that would marry her and change her life forever. His name is Martinus Wolmarans, or as everyone nicknamed him, Tini. Now, we don't know much about the year Tini was born in, nor do we know about his full name or his childhood, but we do know about the personality that Tini had, and according to family lawyer Chris du Plessis, who I'm going to be mentioning a lot, so this is just the first of many mentions of Chris du Plessis. But anyway, Chris du Plessis described Tini as a very soft, open-minded, and charming man. And he was the exact opposite of Ria, personality-wise. And keep in mind that Tini has a charming trait, and this man will rely on it a lot as we progress, albeit for the wrong reasons. So please keep in mind Tini's charming trait. So despite these different personalities, you know the saying, opposites attract. And Ria and Tini courted. Soon they became a married couple, and they gave birth to 3 children, as I said, Mariana, Marina, and Peter. Now keep in mind that during the time that Ria and Tini got married and had children, South Africa was at the height of the apartheid regime, with violence and extreme levels of racism and police brutality all over. And this was the environment that many called reality in South Africa at that time. Ria and Dini obviously were concerned about theirs and their children's safety if they were to continue living in South Africa. And they found Gaborone to be more of a paradise than they had initially imagined. Botswana's economy at the time was growing rapidly, and the government of Botswana were looking for South Africans to live in Botswana and to also contribute to the growing economy and infrastructure with their skills and knowledge. This is because of one key fact. Despite the large size of our economy in recent years, to this very day, Botswana still relies on South Africa for basically everything. Food, beverages, farming equipment, entertainment, TV, the list goes on and on and on. Plus, Ria and Dini were attracted by Botswana's landscape, low crime rate at the time, its peaceful political democracy, a relatively good education system, and a multiracial lifestyle to top it off. Therefore, Ria and Dini made a decision to leave South Africa with their children for Botswana. They packed up their bags, they said goodbye to their families, and left for Gaborone in 1990. Upon their arrival, the Wolmarans set up home in Phakalane, which I already stated had a significant Afrikaner expatriate community. Therefore, Ria and Dini felt right at home, albeit in a neighboring country. They began getting along with the other expat families from South Africa. They enjoyed many of the same luxuries like trips to the golf course, shopping trips, braais, and all of that as their fellow neighbors do. And also, they became heavily involved in the Dutch Reformist Church. At the same time, Ria got herself a job as a head accountant at Unraveled, which is a concrete manufacturing company headquartered in Phakalane's industrial area. And Ria also became very good friends with her boss, Kgosi, who we're going to be talking about a lot in this episode. So, Kgosi was one of the head engineers at Unraveled. So he held a very, very prominent position in the company. And according to Chris du Plessis, yes, strike two. I know it. This man is tied to everyone in this case. You're going to find that out sooner rather than later. But yeah. Chris described Henny as a very clever guy with an agile mind. And this was mainly due to the profession he had within Unraveled. One thing to note about the South African expat community in Phakalane was that they kept to themselves and they looked after their own and they knew each other's families along with their secrets. So, to put it blindly, they were that tight-knit. And although they appreciated the warm welcome that Botswana are known for, they believed that they were outsiders, compared to native Botswana residents and communities like the Indian, Chinese, Muslim, and British communities that are prevalent in Gaborone. And the Wolmarans were no exception. Despite their relocation working out in other areas of their lives, Ria and Dini's marriage suffered a few heavy blows. For instance, Dini worked in construction projects across the country, so he wasn't able to be with Ria and their children all the time due to his demanding work. So he's basically in and out of Gaborone. 1 minute he's in Phakalane, the next he's somewhere, say, Kasani or Hansi or Palape. So you get what I mean. And in a way, Dini's work schedule left Ria feeling alone and neglected at a time where a change like this was meant to strengthen their already tense marriage. According to Ria's older sister, Lorette, in the mini-series that I described earlier, Ria and Dini's marriage was good in the first few years. You know the whole honeymoon phase feeling when you're with someone you love and every moment apart feels like dreadful eternity, but when you're with them, every moment is like the lyrics of 24 Hours by Kalo, nothing's better than having you around, I want it for 24 hours. Yeah, I know, terrible voice, but listen, deep down, I've got a really good singing voice. One day, I'm going to win a Grammy. By God's grace. By God's grace, I'm going to win that Grammy for singing 24 hours, but anyway, sorry. But after having kids and living a domesticated lifestyle, alongside the tense atmosphere that was apartheid, for a while, the spark that Ria and Dini once had was gone, and it continued to deteriorate, almost to the point where every moment apart began to feel better than every moment together for Ria and Dini. Remember how different Ria and Dini's personalities were? That was also another key issue in their marriage, because Dini felt emasculated by his wife's domineering nature, and he felt more bossed around than being loved by his wife. And that's crazy to think about, you know? It's like an average marriage of a soap opera couple, like Bert and Bill Bauer of American soap Guiding Light, which, fun fact, is the world's longest ever running soap opera of all time. Like, the show began as a radio soap in 1937, then it moved over to TV in 1952, and it remained on TV until 2009 after a combined 72 years. So their marriage was practically like Ria and Dini's marriage, although yes, it's a soap, you know, sometimes it's a bit over-exaggerated. Other examples include Arthur and Pauline Fowler of EastEnders, which is one of Britain's longest running soap operas and also one of the most beloved soap operas in Britain. Like, the show is celebrating its 40th anniversary next month. Like, that's how long it's been going on for. And another couple which I'm sure everyone has heard of, you know, is Pretty and Sponga. Saha Gomorrah. Hey, Miss Gomorrah Shami. Yo! So basically, Ria and Dini's marriage was basically like Bert and Bill Bauer's marriage on Guiding Light, Arthur and Pauline Fowler's marriage on EastEnders, and Pretty and Sponga's marriage on Gomorrah, albeit in a more realistic way. And just as a warning, as we progress, I'm going to be making little soapisms here and there. So it's basically like soap opera analogies where I'm just like, you know, either providing like a fun fact or just making some comparisons, because I love soap operas just as much as I love true crime. So bear with me on that one. And so that was the dynamic of Ria and Dini's marriage. And these issues that they brought into their marriage continue to persist. But they didn't know that it would evolve into something much more as the years pass. In 1992, a new family moved into Phakalane along the same road as the Wolmaranses. They were the Bosch family, who had moved from Pietersburg, which is now called Polokwane in the province of Limpopo, South Africa. Now, the third key player in today's episode is Mariette Bosch. Now, that, my friends, is a wonderful Afrikaans name. It's so unique. Sonja Lien. Hey, you know that, like, do you ever have that one moment where you meet someone who's of an Afrikaans descent or like red-blooded Afrikaans, and you hear their name for the first time and you're like, yeah, this person is definitely an Afrikaans person, because Sonja Lien. Bro, now that's a name. That is such a name. But anyway, Mariette Bosch was born between 1949 and 1950. And just like Ria and Dini, we don't know much about her childhood or even her family structure at all. Like, we don't know if she's got siblings. She's got parents, definitely, but we don't know if she's got siblings, aunts, uncles, all of that. However, what is known about Mariette's upbringing was that she was the daughter of a wealthy liquor store owner. So, obviously, she was daddy's little princess growing up, who never lacked for anything growing up. You know, anything she wanted, she got. She was that type of person. According to Chris du Plessis, yet again, 3 times now, and psychologist Dr. Louis Olivier, I don't know how to properly pronounce his surname, but anyway, who's important to the case, but not in the way that you think. You understand why. Mariette was described as a soft-spoken, kind-hearted, and sociable housewife, who was also a really good baker. So when she grew up and became a young woman, she married Justin Bosch, and they would go on to have 3 children of their own, Anton, Charmaine, and Soné. And Justin was described as a big man, physically and mentally in a way. Because according to Kgosi Tau-Bantsi, for the 4th time, this man knows everyone. He can be a bit forceful, but is a fairly positive man. And according to other reports, Justin was known to have a temper. So allegedly, he abused Mariette as a result throughout the course of their marriage. We don't know whether that's true or not, but if this was the case, then, that must have been a very traumatic experience. So, just like Ria and Tini's dynamic, this was just another case of opposites attracting one another. But in this case, Mariette and Justin's dynamic in their marriage fit the more societal dynamic that you often associate of marriage, that Tini and Ria's marriage wasn't, because Justin was more of the leader and Mariette was more of the submissive, quiet wife, So the Bosches moved to Botswana for a better and safer life outside of South Africa, and they found Phakalane to be a perfect fit for all of the same reasons as the Wolmarans. The Bosches were welcomed by the Wolmarans and the rest of the Afrikaner community in Phakalane, as both families became very good friends with each other. And I mean very, very good friends with each other. They would have brides at each other's houses. They would go on holidays together. They would all go to the same church. All that typical stuff involved in the South African expat package that Phakalane offers. One other fact, according to Kgosi Tau-Bantsi for the 5th time, was that Mariette was such a good baker that she made the best milk tarts within the Dutch Reformist church community. So to say that the Bosches made a quick impact in Phakalane was an understatement. Just like Tini, Justin worked a very demanding job of his own in the waterboard drilling industry. And he would also partake in projects across the entire country, so he wouldn't be in Gaborone all the time. So that was one thing that Ria and Mariette had in common. The fact that their husbands have very, very demanding, busy jobs which required them to be traveling all the time. And they realized that, they shared a lot more in common because they have the same amount of kids. And so they would, confide in each other, right? And despite their different personalities, they became the best of friends. They would visit each other every day at their houses because they lived on the same street. So their constant presence was very comforting. And remember when I said that Ria became good friends with her boss at Rokla, who is Henny Kutsia? Well, Ria introduced Henny to Mariette and they two struck up a friendship. And this particular friendship that they struck up is going to become key later on, also for the wrong reasons too. So stay tuned for that. Despite this comfort that Ria was getting from her friendship with Mariette, the same cannot be said about her marriage with Tini, which continued to worsen by the day whenever he was around in Gaborone. And it got to the point that in 1993, Ria and Tini decided to separate. And it was really the only option, because one thing that the story deals with, other than opposites attracting one another and, tight-knit communities, is reputation. Reputation, reputation, reputation. That was a line in Shakespeare's play Othello said by, who was it again? By Othello's second in command after he got fired. I forgot his name, but anyway. So reputation is a big factor in the story. And if Ria were to divorce Tini or vice versa, that will create a divide within the community that they worked so hard to be a part of, especially in their church. Because if there's one fact that all Christian denominations can agree on, be it Catholicism, Lutheranism, Mormonism, Reformism, and Adventism. It's that marriage is a holy sacrament that has to be honored diligently in the eyes of the Lord. Every vow you take before the altar is a promise you make to yourself, God, your partner, your pastor, and the entire church attending the ceremony. So divorce is never an option in marriages based in the church. Like, when you recite the vows for better, for worse, in sickness and in health, till death do us part, you gotta stick to all of that, because I believe that love is a choice. It's not just a feeling. But anyway, and my grandparents, on my dad's side of the family, their marriage is basically based on the Adventist church. Sorry. And they've been married for over 50 years. The same case with my aunt and uncle, who've been married for as long as I've been alive, which is 20 years. But they communicate their feelings to each other, both my grandparents and my aunt and uncle, something which Ria and Tini, I don't think really could do given their schedules. So, yeah. So, Ria and Tini separated. Tini moved out. And during this time, Ria and Tini individually leaned on the Bosches for support. Because obviously, they're close family friends that lived nearby. So it was a no-brainer. However, Tini separating from Ria changed the dynamic between himself and Mariette. I'd imagine that it started off as a subtle flirtation and a compliment here and there, like, oh, Mariette, I like those pearls. They look beautiful. And oh, stop it, Tini. Stop it. You don't mean that. No, I do mean that. Little stuff like that. That started to become more and more serious between Tini and Mariette. Because don't forget, Tini is charming. Very charming. And he probably knew that flirting with Mariette is wrong on so many levels. Why? Because Mariette is his wife's best friend. And he's out there trying to break 2 of the 10 commandments that this man studied throughout his entire life. Do not covet after another man's property, and do not commit adultery. Like, there's nothing wrong in the world. It's all sunshine and butterflies outside. And the teeny Wolmarans take a cold, hard look at themselves and realize, no. Despite my situation with Ria, I'm still a married man at the end of the day. I can't do this. I can't go out and break Ria's heart. It's better to admit to Mariette that I have a crush on her, but I'm not going to do anything because of my marriage to Ria and because of the relationship we've had with Ria and all of that, than to pursue anything further. Why? None of that happened. Because allegedly, Tini and Mariette began having an affair in 1993 behind their partners' backs and during the midst of Tini and Ria separating but are still legally married. And so this affair would begin escalating things into an uncontrollable storm Southern Africa at some point could not control. So in 1994, a year had passed since Ria and Tini separated, and the affair between Tini and Mariette allegedly began. Ria made a decision to take back Tini so that they could work on their marriage, and Tini wanted the same thing, even though he was still participating in an affair with Mariette, his own wife's best friend. So, does that make any sense? I don't think so, but oh well. Tini moved back in, and all seemed well in the Wolmarans' residence for a while. And unfortunately, their marriage became tense yet again. And this time, it was a lot worse. It was a lot more worse. This was mainly because a couple of months after their reunion, Ria woke up one night to find Tini attempting to smother her with a pillow, apparently. But still, this is just traumatic nonetheless. Like, please just sit and digest all of this for a moment, because what the hell, honestly? I mean, it's bad enough that your wife took you back, even though she doesn't know about your affair with her best friend. But it's a lot worse if you tried to smother her with a pillow, hoping she'd just die like that. As you'd expect, this was Ria's final straw, and this subsequently shattered any hope of reconciliation between the couple. Like, there was no love lost now. Like, it was just, just tension. And Tini was so heartbroken after attempting to murder his own wife that, get this, he wrote a suicide note and attempted to take his own life. Yes, you heard me correctly. This man tried to kill himself because he failed to kill his wife. Does this make any sense? No, it doesn't. Like, come on now. Yo. Anyway, at this point, Ria felt sorry for Tini for his sorry attempt at quote-unquote righting his wrongs. But all of that had to take a backseat, because there was one event that would begin the downfall of the friendship between the Bosch and Wolmarans families. In November 1995, Justin drove to Zeerust in South Africa. So Zeerust from Gaborone is about like a 2-hour drive or so, with a new car that he had just purchased. The reason being was to drop off his and Mariette's only son, Anton, at his boarding school. Justin dropped Anton off and made his journey back to Gaborone when he swerved into a donkey cart and caused an accident. Unfortunately, Justin would not survive the accident, as he died instantly, and his death obviously shocked and devastated his family in South Africa and Botswana, along with the entirety of Phakalane. Mariette obviously was left distraught after her husband's death, because despite the fact that she was having an affair with her neighbor and her best friend's husband, she loved her husband regardless. Speaking of which, Ria was supporting Mariette in terms of processing her grief and just really being there for her in her time of need. And she also asked Tini to do the same thing. So Ria unknowingly gave her husband permission to be with her best friend, who just so happens to be the other woman, at any time he pleased. Oh, God. So, anyway, Phakalane's residents rallied together to support the Boshces as they mourned Justin. But no sooner did Phakalane's residents pay their condolences to Mariette and her children, that tongues started to wag, especially in the Afrikaans expat community, as some details about his death was suspicious. Remember that Justin worked in the waterboard drilling industry until the day he died, and he worked all over the country drilling water as a result. Now, Justin was not the type of guy to become exhausted easily, especially when he's driving. On the docuseries Justice in the Line of Fire: Motive for Murder, Ria's younger sister spoke to host Sandra Prinsloo, who's one of South Africa's most well-known actresses who starred in film and TV shows such as The Gods Must Be Crazy, South Africa's first soap opera Igoli Place of Gold, and drama series of Sondes, among others. And Anne told the story about how she heard a rumor involving Mariette, Tini, and Anton being involved in Justin's death. Apparently, Mariette and Tini had planned to get Justin out of the way by drugging him, a common thing you'll hear a lot about in this episode. Tini had procured pills, God knows where, to give to Mariette, and she soon gave those pills to Anton. Mariette told Anton to give these pills to Justin so that he can take them and they will help him keep his energy levels up and his eyes on the road. Obviously, these pills did everything but keep him up and alive. And after Justin's death, Mariette was the sole beneficiary in Justin's multi-million Buddha estate, and she inherited everything. So people that were comforting Mariette also began to notice that she was becoming a lot more, although subtly, physically intimate around, guess who? Wolmarans himself. So it begs the question, could this be an unexpected car accident Justin died in, and as a result he left Mariette, a bereft widow who was handsomely compensated a lot of money? Or could this be a plan that both Mariette and Tini, probably Tini, and you'll find out why, formulated so that one spouse gets out of the way physically and they will reap the financial windfall that Mariette received in the upcoming rendezvous? Your guess is as good as mine. But what I can tell you is that Justin's death only escalated the affair between Tini and Mariette. They would drive to Joburg, find a motel, and have loads of sexual escapades within the privacy of their adultery. How is it that middle-aged Afrikaners have a better love life than me? Jolo can really make you do crazy things, ne? And I have a feeling that Ria was starting to become suspicious about the amount of time Tini wasn't spending with her, but with some other woman. And I'm probably sure that Mariette crossed her mind many times. But she was probably like, not her. Of all people, it can't be Mariette. And remember what I said earlier about how you think the world of your best friend because they can never do no wrong in your eyes? Unfortunately, Mariette did do wrong, but Ria hadn't realized it yet. Like, I'd rather die than be in her shoes, eh? Because that's just tragic, and it's a very painful thought to have if you think about it. Also, around this time, Ria uncovered some very concerning information at her workplace, Gwenarokla. She had uncovered embezzled funds that were most probably made by her boss, Henny. Because remember, Ria was a head accountant. So she would often, do the book checking. And she realized that, wait, the money that was here is not actually within the accounts. So what the heck's happening? So obviously, she did the right thing. She called auditors, and they would be brought in to investigate the matter further at a later date. So to say that Ria's got a lot on her plate was an understatement. But she had to act. She made the decision to finally begin divorce proceedings with Tini. She served them divorce papers, and she was ready to take back control of herself. Because this woman was tired of Machila Saratini. Like, she was well and truly tired of Tini just being, a liability to her personal freedom, pretty much, and just his utter nonsense. Now, Tini was probably shocked when he was served divorce papers by Ria, and he didn't tell Mariette about Ria divorcing him. And it was at this point that this man made a very grave, and if you ask me, a very fatal mistake. Because Mariette was beginning to become impatient. She was tired of being the other woman, and like many mistresses past and present, she wanted to become Mrs. Tini Wolmarans, so that she can be taken off by a man again. Mariette's love for Ria soon turned to jealousy and envy, probably, because she's still married to him. why can't it be me? And so Tini obviously noticed this, and I'm sure he lied to her so many times through his charm to just ease her growing annoyance. Like, she's probably like, listen, your wife is living the life that I want to live. And Tini's like, don't worry, baby girl. Don't worry. As long as I live, you're the only woman for me. I love you, Mariette, and I want to be with you. Don't worry. Rio will soon become a piece of the past. You are my future, you know? And he's probably just caressing her blonde hair and all of that. So, yeah, Tini just probably lied to her because like many other men in his position, Tini wanted to have the best of both worlds. He wanted to eat his cake with Mariette while pretending to be a loving, pious, and loyal husband to Ria. But Mariette wanted action. She didn't want words. And as we progress into the next part of this case and beyond, please keep in mind this question. Who is Mariette Bosch really? Was Mariette Bosch a schemer who wanted to have Tini all to herself by any means necessary? Was she a seductress who seduced a loyal husband away from his wife? Was she possibly a murderer because now that she's got this very man she wanted for so long, now she can pressure him into attempting to kill his wife and also pressure him into helping her kill her own husband? Or was Mariette Bosch really naive? You know, caught up in the love she has for her husband who just died and the love she has for her best friend's husband. And as a result, Tini probably used her in his game. We're going to have to find that out. I am going to boil another cup of tea and I'll be right back. Alright, so now we're heading into the events of Wednesday the 26th of June 1996. And it starts a day earlier on Tuesday the 25th of June 1996. Mariette took a trip, but not to the grocery store or the casino or her favorite fashion store, like always, because don't forget, she's an affluent woman, but all the way back to Polokwane in Limpopo, South Africa. The reason for this trip was very strange. She first turned up at the doorstep of Dennis Weber, who was one of Justin's close friends. Dennis and Justin had such a good friendship that when Justin died in his car accident 7 months earlier, Dennis was given Justin's entire gun collection as per Justin's will. So when Mariette turned up at Dennis's doorstep, he was surprised because the last time they saw each other was at Justin's funeral. And Mariette wasn't in mourning anymore, but she was in a bit of a rush, according to his court testimony. Mariette wasn't at Dennis's place for a catch-up of an old friend, as you may have already figured out. She asked Dennis to borrow her one of Justin's pistols. Now, Dennis was confused because for as long as he'd known Mariette, she never held a gun, nor was she a big fan of guns. So, was it a grief speaking or something more? Dennis asked Mariette what she was going to do with the gun. And Mariette told him, look, I want to do some target practice. Now, Dennis didn't think too much about Mariette's real motive behind this favor at the time, so he gave her one of Justin's pistols as requested. The next stop Mariette makes was at her brother-in-law Mike's house. Now, Mike is Justin's brother, and he remained in Polokwane with his wife Judith when Justin, Mariette, and their family left. And according to the sources, Mariette and Judith's relationship was described as tense and acrimonious sometimes, as Judith never really liked Mariette, and she made no secret of that. So whenever they'd see each other, no love was lost. They'd argue as if they were Tom and Jerry, Mike and Judith were also very surprised to see Mariette, who was still in a hurry, and she was carrying the pistol that Dennis gave her. Mike quickly realized the gun Mariette was holding is one of Justin's guns that he gave to Dennis, and he asked her, "Mariette, what are you doing with the gun?" Mariette told Mike, "Hey, look, I have this gun here because I want to do some target practice, but can you teach me how to use the gun and how to fire it?" Mike was reluctant, very reluctant, because just like Dennis, he'd never seen Mariette hold a gun or even be interested in owning one. And he asked her why he should be the one teaching her how to use a gun. To which Mariette replied, and I quote, "What do you think I'm going to do? Shoot someone?" Well, I wouldn't say that if I were you, considering what happens the next day. Anyway, Mike begrudgingly showed her how to use it, but he couldn't teach her how to fire a gun as there was no field nearby in the area Mike and Judith lived in. During this short visit, Mariette and Judith had a talk, which was strange given the terrible dynamics. Mariette confessed to Judith that not only was she in love with Dini, that they'd been having an affair for a long time, even during Justin's death and funeral, but that Mariette wished to marry Dini, which is a key piece of information that's going to come in later. Judith was probably shocked at what her sister-in-law just confessed to her. And I can imagine that Judith called her out on it because, let's not forget, Judith made no secret of the fact that she never liked Mariette. Anyway, before Mariette left, she told Mike and Judith that she was taking the gun with her back to Gaborone. And Mike was like, "Mariette, you know you're committing a crime, right?" And Mike was right to bring that up because gun smuggling in Botswana, whether you're bringing a gun in from another country or you're taking it throughout the country without a license, is illegal. And if charged and found guilty in a court of law, you could be paying a fine up to 500,000 bula, depending on the make of the gun, or a prison sentence of the maximum amount of time served being 25 years. Or you could be fined and jailed, according to Botswana's Arms and Ammunition Act of 2018. Mariette told Mike and Judith, "Don't worry, I'll bring the gun back. I'll bring it back secretly without the border control and the police knowing." And now Mariette left for her final stop in South Africa, which was her mother's house. So she caught up with her mom, and Mariette asked her mother if she could come to Gaborone for a visit in the near future, just to see her and the grandkids. To which her mom accepted, because if you were a grandparent, would you pass up the opportunity to see your grandchildren? No, you wouldn't. So anyway, after seeing her mother, Mariette traveled back to Gaborone with the gun, and somewhat by the grace of God, managed to smuggle the gun into the country. On the morning of the 26th of June 1996, Ria made a phone call to Henny, her boss who might be embezzling her workplace Gwenarokla out of a lot of money. She confronted Henny and told him that auditors would be coming the next day to investigate the matter. The day progressed quite normally for Mariette and Ria. Then around the late hours of the afternoon into the early evening, Mariette gave her daughter, Charmaine, money. And she told Charmaine, "Hey, listen, the money I just gave you, take your boyfriend out, go into town and have dinner." And Mariette made one other request. "Take Morena, Ria's daughter, with you." Now, Charmaine was puzzled. And rightly so, because unlike her mother and Ria, Charmaine and her younger sister Soné didn't have a very close friendship with the Wolmarans kids. So it's weird given that they don't spend a lot of time together like their mothers do. But yet Mariette was saying, listen, right? Ask Marina to just do it weird with you guys, just for the night. But anyway, Charmaine did as she was asked. She invited Marina to go out with her and her boyfriend into Gaborone. Now this left Ria all alone in the Wolmarans' residence, as Peter and Mariana, the other two Wolmarans kids, already flew the nest years before. And Tini was in Maun, finalizing payments to his employees for a construction project that he undertook, and he was to be back in Gaborone the next day. Once Charmaine, Morena, and Charmaine's boyfriend went out, Mariette went to Sone's school for some parent-teacher consultation or to pick up Sone. I don't know. Anyway, she returned to her house at 7 p.m., whereby she stated in her alibi that she watched television and stayed in the house for the rest of the night, and was even with Sone in the same bed. Around 8 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., a scream and 2 gunshots were heard by Ria's next-door neighbor. After checking out the street, nothing seemed amiss, so the neighbor figured that it was probably just some random noise. How wrong this neighbor was. At 10 p.m., Charmaine and her boyfriend, along with Marina, arrived at the Wolmarans' house to drop off Marina. Marina walked in, and the house was dead silent as she called out for her mother. She walked towards the kitchen and found a sight that no one, especially a child in this case, should ever bear to see. Marina sees her mother, collapsed, face down, back up, and bleeding, with a tray and shattered teacups all over the kitchen floor. Marina was horrified and panicked as she rushed to her mother. She didn't think she was shot, but still she ran outside and she cried for help, as she didn't know the emergency number. Soon the entire street flocked to the Wolmarans' house in their nightwear to find out what was wrong, while one neighbor called the emergency services. Once they arrived, they cordoned off the Wolmarans' house and acted to save Ria's life. However, it was too late. Maria Magdalene Ria Wolmarans was pronounced dead. Once the police arrived at the crime scene, news of Ria's shooting and subsequent murder spread throughout Phakalane. Mariette arrived at the Wolmarans' house and appeared to be shocked and distraught. Obviously, Ria's neighbors knew how close Mariette and Ria were, and they asked Mariette what she thought happened to Ria. Mariette theorized that Ria may have suffered a heart attack and died. But that was not the case at all, since Ria was found bleeding on the floor with 2 bullet holes in her, along with the fact that Ria's next-door neighbor heard 2 gunshots. So police began investigating by looking at the crime scene, which they theorized might have been a robbery gone wrong. Phakalane is no stranger to robberies. After all, it's a posh and highly sought-after area. But something just didn't feel right about this particular theory. Police took a closer inspection of Ria's body and found 2 bullet holes, as I just said, on her back. One on her chest in the rib region, and another on her stomach. So police thought to themselves that this could have been committed by 2 assailants, or one who shot Ria from a distant range before walking up to her and finishing the job off with the bullet into her chest. The police then searched the rest of the house, and nothing was out of place. No items were stolen, and the police's theory about a robbery gone wrong quickly fell apart. While some police officers were analyzing the house, Ria's body was taken into the morgue for an autopsy, while some police officers were interviewing Ria's neighbors outside. Police quickly realized from the interviews they did how close Ria was to Mariette, so they began interviewing her. Mariette tells them that after arriving from Sone's school at 7 p.m., she was at her house the whole night at the time of Ria's death, watching television and being with Sone in her bed. Sone confirmed Mariette's alibi. However, when police interviewed the Bosch's domestic worker, a woman by the name of Aniki Ntwagai, she provided a different story. Aniki confirmed the first half of Mariette's alibi, that she came home at 7 p.m. However, Aniki tells the police that Mariette starts her car and leaves her house around 8 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., the time window in which Ria was killed, before returning back home an hour before Ria's body was found by Marina. Police asked her how she knew, and she stated that her room, which was probably an outside room, given how domestic workers live separately from the main house, her room is next to the car park, which housed Mariette's car. This gave the police pause, because now they were thinking, is Mariette lying to them about her whereabouts? And if so, could she be Ria's murderer? Ria's family was notified about her death, and they were in complete devastation. They wondered who could do this to Ria, who had no enemies whatsoever according to them. Tini, on the other hand, was notified by the police about Ria's death, and not by Marina, which is sketchy if you ask me, given that Marina is Tini and Ria's daughter. But anyway, Tini was already on the way back to Gaborone by the time he heard of his wife's death. Once he arrived, police asked Tini to come over to the police station for an interview, because in cases like this, since time immemorial, police will always suspect the victim's romantic partner first. Just because Tini wasn't around doesn't mean that he didn't get someone to kill his wife. And so, police need to be 100% certain that Tini was telling them the truth. They asked him where he was at the time of Ria's murder, and he told them he was in Maun. Already, his alibi is a bit flimsy, because according to some of the Wolmarans' neighbors, they told the police that Tini was in Francistown for construction work. Therefore, the police were already skeptical of the actual location that Tini was in during the night that Ria died. Tini goes on to mention that around the time she died, he was sorting out payroll for his builders in Maun with his foreman. He was supposed to leave Maun earlier that day, but he was stuck at the bank the whole day with his foreman. And they left the bank well after closing times. And I'm probably thinking, if there's any bank that this man and his foreman were stuck at, it's probably FNB. But anyway, I'm sorry. I just thought about FNB for a bit. So anyway, the foreman and Tini went back to Tini's house to sort out the cash and place it into envelopes. So the foreman left Tini's place at around 8:30 p.m. and Tini went to sleep straight after, as he planned to wake up around midnight and begin driving throughout the night into the early morning, as the journey from Maun to Gaborone was over 9 hours long. At some point during his trip home, Tini hears of Ria's death and is determined to return home soon to his family. However, Tini could have lied to the police about driving a whole 9 hours back to Gaborone, as it was alleged that Tini took a flight instead of a drive back to Gaborone from Maun and was picked up by Mariette and Marina. By plane, the trip from Maun to Gaborone would be over an hour long, so it was far shorter than a non-stop drive. So the police's suspicion of Tini deepened after learning about this. But they couldn't prove it, as it was 1996. Security cameras weren't used all over the country yet, and EFTs and online payments and all of that didn't exist. So the police had to take Tini's statement with a grain of salt. Tini provided them with the foreman's number And soon after, the police called that same foreman and they questioned him 3 times about his whereabouts, and the foreman confirmed Tini's story. However, he could have been coerced by Tini to lie to the police. So we don't know if the foreman was telling the truth or not. Now the police asked Tini if he knew of anyone that could harm Ria. Tini then confidently said that Henny Kutsia may be involved in his wife's murder. The police were now curious as to why Tini would say this, and he asked them to provide more information about Henny. To which Tini told the police that Henny was embezzling funds from Rokla, according to Ria. Tini shared his belief with the police that Henny may have sent someone or even shot Ria himself to keep his embezzlement secret from coming out. Which is an explosive statement if you think about it. Because definitely money is the root for all evil in this case. And anyone would do anything to keep their secrets secret. Yet again though, police had to take Tini's belief that Henny did it with also a grain of salt. And they ultimately let him go. Police soon called Henny and they asked to speak to him. They told him about Tini believing that he had a hand in committing Ria's murder because of his speculated embezzlement of Rokla. And Henny adamantly denied these claims. He told the police that the auditors that investigated the embezzlement story the day after Ria died didn't find any funds missing. When asked to provide an alibi, Henny stated that he was nowhere near Ria's house on the night of the murder, but was at a friend's braai until 10 p.m. when he made his way home. Henny gives the police the number of his friend, who confirmed his alibi, and the story is gonna come back later, so keep Henny's alibi in mind. Henny also tells the police that Tini got Ria's life insurance payout, which Rokla paid for her, and the amount of her life insurance was 200,000 pula at the time. And this gave the police more cause to be suspicious of Tini. Because if there's a life insurance amounted to 5, 6, or 7 figures that you have, best believe someone close to you is planning your death, much like Rosemary Ndlovu, the killer cop who killed off practically the entirety of her family because she wanted to get low life insurance payouts. Police also uncovered that Henny owned a similar pistol to the one that Ria got shot by. And so they asked him to provide his gun for ballistics testing. And Henny complied and gave the gun to the police. They did their testing, and the police discovered that Henny's bullets in his gun wasn't a match to the bullets police retrieved from Ria's body. So police believed that there was no way Henny could have committed the murder. Police even got their own financial auditors to look at Rokla's books, and nothing concerning or criminal was found. So Henny was crossed off the suspect list. Despite the suspicions of Tini and Mariette, police had no other suspects or witnesses that could bring a new light to the case, and the case was in danger of becoming cold very quickly. It could have well been a robbery gone wrong, according to them. Anyway, the police got the autopsy report, and it indeed confirmed that Ria was shot from the back, in her ribs, and on her stomach. And it was very likely that she did not see her assailant or assailants at all by the time she was shot and killed. Ria's body was given to her family, who organized a funeral and burial to take place in South Africa. The Wolmarans and Boshces traveled to South Africa for Ria's funeral, and according to Anne in the miniseries Justice in the Line of Fire, Motive for Murder, Ria's mother prepared a room for the visiting families. She allocated a room for Charmaine to sleep in, and a room for Mariette and Soné to sleep in. Tini was supposed to sleep on the couch in the living room, and he didn't mind that at all. However, on the night before Ria's funeral, Tini walked into Mariette and Sone's room to find Mariette distraught. Sone was sent to sleep in the living room as Mariette and Tini comforted each other during the entire night. You know what I mean by comforted. I'm talking Barry White comforted. Anyway, on the morning of the funeral, Ria's mother found Mariette and Tini together on the same bed, and she was pissed. And I can understand how Ria's mother feels, because clearly Mariette and Tini did not respect the fact that they're burying Ria, Tini's wife, and Mariette's best friend. Tini explained to Ria's mother that it was just a misunderstanding, that they were distraught over the thought of burying Ria. But her mom was not having it at all. She knew that, Tini's lying to get himself out of this, because this is just straight up disrespectful. Despite that, the funeral proceeded without any other hiccups, and Ria was buried. During the time Ria was buried, Mariette and Tini made a trip of their own, back to Mike and Judith's place. Remember when Mariette took that gun from Dennis and wanted Mike to teach her how to use it? Well, they brought the gun Mariette borrowed back to Mike and Judith to safekeep. A terrible mistake that these guys would later realize. Anyway, Mariette and Tini, along with the rest of their families, returned to Phakalane. Now, get this. Mariette and Tini decided to live together. You heard me correctly. They decided to move into their own rented home with Marina, Sone, and Charmaine. Oh God. This was because around the time Ria got murdered, the lease on the Wolmarans and Boshces homes got expired. So they all moved into this rented house in Phakalane. Marina struggled to deal with this change like any other grieving daughter. I mean, hell, you're living with 4 other people who you're not really related. Three of them you're not even related to, but hey, and Marina wasn't liked by Mariette and Sone, so that caused some significant tension in the house that all 5 of them were living in. And Tini's treatment of Marina, his own daughter, worsened too, as Tini forbade Marina from discussing her mother's death in the house in his presence. Is this how a father should treat his grieving daughter at a time when she's vulnerable and needs his love more than ever to properly process her mother's death? No, not at all. But Tini didn't care, because all his attention was focused on Mariette and her daughters, instead of his own. What a lousy excuse for a father. Hey. Then things only worsened for Marina. Weeks after her mother's death, she was preparing to go to work. And as she was driving to her workplace, she mysteriously blacked out in the middle of the road. When she came to, this girl found herself in the middle of the train track with her car wrecked. But she survived. What the heck? Whoa. Now, once this accident became news in Phakalane, the rumor mill started spinning, and it was alleged that Marina was starting to become suspicious about Mariette and Tini being involved in her mother's murder. And as a result, Mariette and Tini conspired to drug Marina like they might have done with Justin and have her die in a car accident to get her out of the way. Good grief, that's just unbelievable. What the hell? Tini conspiring to have his own daughter killed. The same guy who's supposedly very pious, goes to church every single Sunday, but engaged in an affair possibly had his wife and his mistress, best friend, killed, and now his daughter? Nah, just nah. Despite Marina surviving her accident, Tini and Mariette focused more of their attention on realizing their ultimate goal: getting married 3 months after Ria died. So, Mariette took a trip to South Africa to buy herself a wedding dress in Pretoria around September 1996. And she was very excited. Finally she was going to be marrying the man that she wanted to have for the longest damn time. And guess who hears of Mariette's wedding dress search? Judith Bosch. Then Judith started to realize that, hang on, something's not right. And she started to think about the recent events that happened between the Wolmarans and the Bosch families as well. She started to put 2 and 2 together, and she shared her suspicions of Mike. Judith believes that the day Maria got the gun from Dennis Weber, Ria gets shot and dies a day later. Soon after Ria died, Mariette gave the gun to them to safekeep after her funeral. Therefore, Mariette could have been Ria's murderer, and that probably in possession of the murder weapon she used. So what did Mike and Judith do? They relinquished the gun to the South African Police Service and told them about their suspicions. The South African Police Service would later call the Botswana Police Service with news about the gun that Judith gave them and their theory. The gun was then sent from South Africa to Botswana for ballistics testing, while the Botswana Police Service arrested Mariette for gun smuggling in October 1996, the same month which she was supposed to marry Tini. Now, Tini was livid upon discovering Mariette's arrest. He went straight to the police station that Mariette was in custody and pressured her not to say anything to the police, which is very, very suspicious if you ask me. Luckily, the police noticed this and they arrested Tini for intimidation of a suspect in a pending case. Tini was then let go from the police station a couple of hours later, but Mariette wasn't so lucky. After the ballistics test of the gun that Mike and Judith gave the South African police to give to the Botswana police was conducted, the police soon discovered the smoking gun. The bullets, along with the make of the pistol Mariette borrowed from Dennis Weber before giving it to Mike and Judith Bosch, was an exact match to the gun and bullets found in Ria's body. Therefore, Mariette's charges were upgraded to murder. Once news of Mariette's arrest for murder broke out, the entirety of Botswana and Southern Africa were in shock, and this case made headlines on many tabloid newspapers. Because if Mariette was found guilty of killing Ria, she will be sentenced to the mandatory punishment of murder in Botswana, which is the death penalty, making her the first white person in Botswana's judicial history to be placed on death row and later be executed. This case got sensationalized very quickly, and this was overwhelming for the Botswana Police Service to deal with. Nonetheless, they carried on. They re-interviewed Soné, Charmaine, and Aniki, the Bosch domestic worker, and they all stuck to the same stories that they provided. Aniki was the only person among the three to provide new information. Because remember, Aniki was the person that said that Mariette left between 8 to 8:30, which was the window in which Mariette was killed. Sorry, not Mariette, Ria was killed, before returning home an hour before Ria's body was found. So, remember that? Here's the thing. Aniki told the police that after she made her statement, Tini discovered what she said, and he attempted to pressure her to change her statement. Once that didn't work out, Dini threatened to kill Aniki if she didn't do what she was told. But Aniki stuck to the same story. This woman, rightfully so, is a G. And she had no real motive. Because here's the thing. Aniki lost her job during Ria's funeral and the proceedings and all of that. And this woman was just trying to be the bearer of the truth. She had no actual motive. So she agreed to testify against Mariette in court, while Soné and Charmaine agreed to testify to defend Mariette. Unfortunately, Aniki would vanish and later die of natural causes before she could testify against Mariette in a court of law. But some speculated that Aniki was probably murdered by Dini and Mariette. But as I said, it's just a rumor. We don't know if it's true or not. And this case is filled with so many rumors that it's just very hard to keep track of everything. But regardless, Aniki's statement was accepted as evidence. Speaking of Mariette, she got released on bail before her trial began, and her and Dini got married between 1997 to 1998. If there's one thing about Dini, according to the sources and miniseries Justice in the Line of Fire, Motive for Murder, and Riskunde wa Lewon's Drama, was that Mariette, according to Dini, was not in any way solely responsible for killing Ria, or even responsible at all for killing Ria. Some suggested it was because Dini loved Mariette so much. But personally, I don't think that's the case. Because Dini lusted for Mariette. Because they had an affair, for crying out loud. You know the saying, the first time's a mistake, the second time isn't? It was clearly that, because a 4-year affair that could have possibly killed 2 people instead of 1 person, and definitely destroyed families, was clearly the choice Dini and possibly Mariette made so that he could be with Mariette. It was the ultimate sacrifice Dini was willing to make. And Dini did all he could do to prove Mariette's innocence. He went to Dr. Louise Olivier, the psychologist and neurologist that I mentioned earlier, to have her perform a mental evaluation on Mariette. And after doing so, Dr. Olivier stated that Mariette had a low IQ. I'm not sure which number was Mariette's IQ at, but Dr. Olivier stated that it was under 86, which is below the average intelligence mark. One possible reason for this, according to Dr. Olivier, was that Mariette had a dependent personality disorder, in which a person cannot in any way take care of themselves and is very submissive and has a strong need to be looked after by others. Considering the fact that Mariette was pampered in her childhood by her rich dad, this limited the opportunity to be properly taken care of emotionally and gain a sense of independence. And this was something Dini probably noticed and used to his advantage. Because if I were to be honest with you, remember, Dini felt emasculated by Ria throughout their marriage. And with Mariette, he was now in a position of control, which I believe he always wanted. And he could exploit Mariette's submissiveness to suit his own odds. Because that man was a charmer who could not control himself. Even when Mariette and Dini went to Dr. Olivier, Mariette barely spoke to Dr. Olivier, and Dini did most of the talking. And this wasn't just with Dr. Olivier alone. This was with every other person that they met in preparation for the trial. So it's a no-brainer that Dini was manipulative. Dini went as far as getting a hypnotist by the name of Evans Brown to hypnotize Mariette and properly establish her alibi under hypnosis and prove one of Tini's other theories, which this man believed in with all of his heart, that Kgosi drugged Mariette to kill Ria, thus making Kgosi the actual culprit, according to Tini. Now, according to what Evans Brown said on the miniseries Justice in the Line of Fire, Motive for Murder, Mariette not only told him about the alibi she gave the police, but she also told him that the day before she left to get the gun from Dennis Weber, Henny came over to her house with chocolate and champagne. Now, this wasn't an unusual occurrence because, remember, Henny was very close with Ria and Mariette because they were all friends. Now, Mariette had the chocolate and champagne and was drugged and manipulated by Henny into killing Ria on his orders so that he can be scot-free from the possible embezzlement he did at Gwenarokla, which is crazy if you ask me. Mariette also stated that she had a headache all throughout the time she was drugged and still had bouts of headaches here and there. When Dr. Olifia was told of Mariette's possible drug trip to Polokwane and her headaches, she suggested that it could possibly be because Mariette was under a fugue state. Now, fugue in psychology, just for your information, is basically temporary amnesia, when someone finds themselves in a different place, not remembering what happened before, or even personal details like their name and their age. So as much as this theory was plausible, Evans Brown also stated that people under hypnosis can also lie. So just take this theory with significant caution. Speaking of Kgosi, you're probably wondering, where is this guy? It turns out that after he was questioned by police the day after Ria's murder, he moved to Ghana for new employment. So it's a bit suspicious as well, despite the fact that the audit done on him at Gwenarokla proved that he didn't embezzle the company. Or did he cover his tracks really well? Because Henny agreed to return to Botswana after talking to prosecutor Unora Mack, who will mention again quite a lot as we proceed. So Henny agreed to return to Botswana and testify against Mariette in exchange for being granted immunity if he incriminated himself in terms of the whole embezzlement scandal and its relation to Ria's murder. So that's also very suspicious if you think about it. Because Ria could have still committed embezzlement and may or may not have killed Ria to keep this quiet as he cleaned the books he cooked. So I guess we'll never know if Henny really stole the money from Gwenarokla, or did he not? As Tini organized Mariette's legal team, he made sure that they listened to his word and his word only, according to Mariette's first defense lawyer, Advocate Edward Fasole Luke, who appeared on the miniseries Justice in the Line of Fire, Motive for Murder, yet again. In early 1999, Mariana, Tini's eldest daughter, was getting married in South Africa. And Tini and Mariette, who by the way got special permission by the Botswana government to attend the wedding as long as she still respected her bail conditions, came for the wedding. Mariette met up with some of her lawyer friends in South Africa during that time. And her lawyer friends told Mariette that she can actually stay in South Africa for as long as she wished and break her bail conditions in Botswana, because South Africa cannot send their citizens back into countries that practiced the death penalty in its legal proceedings. Mariette pondered over this because, let's be honest, this was a lifeline. If this woman was in any way guilty of murder, staying in South Africa would be the best way for her to evade any form of legal prosecution. However, Tini was so confident in her legal team, which she organized and controlled, to get her acquitted for murder. So he convinced her to return to Botswana with him after the wedding and face the music in the court of law. Dini and Mariette returned to Botswana, and the trial of Mariette Bosch Wolmarans began in December 1999, in which the media devoured this trial like it's early Christmas lunch filled with roast chicken, 7 colors, and champagne across the table. Now, Botswana, just like South Africa, does not do jury trials, but bench trials instead, in which the judge solely decides on the legal fate of the defendant. Judge Isaac Abuahai presided over the case, and he was responsible for what might happen to Mariette if found guilty or not guilty, according to the evidence that he was going to be presented. According to the prosecution, which was led by Unoramak, the case contained, and I quote, the 4 L's of murder: love, loot, lust, and loathing. What a legendary statement. In fact, what a goated statement, actually. Like, if someone were to write a book about this case, please, whatever you do, all right, just make sure the title is Love, Loot, Lust, and Loathing, because, bro, that's the type of, that's a bar right there. That is a bar right there. Anyway, the prosecutors revealed the sordid details of Dini and Ria's affair turned marriage after the deaths of their spouses, and theorized to the court that based on the frustration Mariette had towards Dini for just being the other woman to him, and her growing jealousy and envy towards Ria that clouded their once close friendship, Mariette planned to have Ria killed, although she didn't know that Ria was almost done with divorcing Dini. Because here's the thing. Remember Mariana, the daughter that got married and blah, blah, blah? When she testified in court, she said that she found torn up divorce papers after the death of her mother, in which Dini told her to throw away. So that's a bit suspicious. But anyway, back to the prosecution's theory. The prosecution continued by saying that the day before Ria died, she went to Polokwane to get the gun, along with a little lesson from Mike Bosch, her brother-in-law, on how to use it before smuggling the gun into the country. And on the night of Ria's murder, Mariette drove out of her house at 8 to 8:30 p.m. and drove for a bit before parking just before Ria's house. She got out, took the gun she borrowed from Dennis, and jumped over Ria's wall into her backyard. She snuck into the Wolmarans' house as Ria was taking a tray of teacups from her sitting room into the kitchen. Mariette loaded the gun, snuck up behind her, and fired twice at point-blank range before quickly running away and leaving the woman she once called her best friend to die. Mariette got back in the car, drove back to her house, and as stated in Aniki's statement, and later she remarried a man she longed to call her husband after years of adultery. And armed with the ballistics report on the gun Mariette used, details of Mariette and Dini's affair, Ria's impending divorce from Dini, and Aniki's statement to the police contradicting Mariette's whereabouts, the prosecution's theory was strong. But it was mainly circumstantial, and Mariette's defense team quickly pointed it out, as they, or rather Dini, believed that the bullets found on Ria's body was not investigated forensically for evidence for starters. The defense team brought about a slew of witnesses to further prove that Mariette couldn't have done the crime, beginning with Soné and Charmaine, who stated that Mariette was at the house all evening. However, when Unora Mac, the lead prosecutor, cross-examined Soné and Charmaine, they both couldn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mariette was at the Bosch house all night, as she alleged. Because, remember, Charmaine went out with her boyfriend and Marina on Mariette's orders, and Soné fell asleep when she was in the bed with Mariette before she allegedly left to murder Ria. Therefore, Judge Aboahai rejected Soné and Charmaine's testimonies. The defense's next option was Dr. Elise Olivier, as she testified on Mariette's mental state, sharing that due to Mariette's low IQ, dependent personality disorder, fugue state, and her overall character, Mariette did not fit the profile of a killer at all and was not a liar. However, Judge Aboahai also rejected Dr. Olivier's statement, and the press dug into Dr. Olivier's background because her colorful fashion sense, her big blonde hair, and her heavy makeup, like check out pictures of her, you'll see what I mean, didn't fit the aesthetic most psychologists at the time had. And the press discovered that not only was she a licensed psychologist and neurologist, but she was also a sex doctor for a prominent South African magazine. So everyone reading this was like, this woman's a psychologist? A sex doctor? Nah, she can't be. And if you think about it, the media slut-shamed Dr. Olivier because of her job as a sex doctor. And although it's wrong, it was a massive selling point on its headlines, as it sold into the minds of its audience that Dr. Olivier wasn't a genuine psychologist, which is messed up. But then again, it's the media. Morals and ability, regardless of character, are a foreign concept to many working in the media industry. In fact, the press nicknamed Mariette Botswana's White Mischief. And you're probably wondering, what is White Mischief? Well, it's this book that turned into a movie in the UK, and it was based off the true story of a British woman in Kenya killing her rich, cheating husband. So yeah, the case got that big. One other thing which I want to quickly mention was that Justin, Dennis, and Judith, they testified against Mariette. And they all spoke about Mariette's behavior the day before Ria was murdered when she went to visit all three of them. And when the defense tried to ask, look, did Mariette tell you that she was having a headache, as she already stated according to Dr. Olivier and ETC? All three of them said, nah, she didn't tell us that she was having a headache. She was more rushed than anything. So that fell apart for the defense too. So now the defense, or should I say Dini, tried the last tactic, which was putting Henny Kotsia's apparent innocence into question again. When Henny testified, the defense brought in 3 witnesses from the braai he attended on the night Ria got murdered, and Henny's ex-wife to cast some last-minute doubt, hoping they'll secure a last-minute win as if the Manchester United at the recent Manchester derby. By the way, glory, Man United. I'm supporting that team for life, okay? Despite all the good and, bad times, that team's still my team, so, yeah. Anyway, the 3 witnesses stated that Henny didn't leave at the time he left, and actually left much earlier around the time of Ria's murder, between 8 to 8:30 p.m. It had seemed to the 3 witnesses that Henny came for the food and left just as soon as he arrived. However, under cross-examination by Unoramak, it was quickly determined that this wasn't really the case. I mean, it's a braai after all, and almost all braais involve alcohol and or other beverages. Unoramak quickly determined that all 3 witnesses were probably inebriated upon seeing Henny and possibly didn't have a proper sense of time because they were drunk. So their testimonies didn't prove that Henny could have committed the crime. And Henny's ex-wife wasn't any better because she told the court that Henny abused her throughout the entirety of her marriage. But when Unoramak cross-examined her, she couldn't prove any substance or physical proof to that claim. So ultimately, the defense was at its wit's end because the 3 witnesses failed and Henny's ex-wife failed to cast doubt on Henny Kutsia. The prosecution and defense rested their cases, and Judge Aboahai deliberated with himself and the evidence presented on whether Mariette was guilty or not. on Monday the 21st of February 2000, Judge Aboahai made his decision. Mariette stood as she learned of her fate. She was found guilty of murdering her best friend, Maria Magdalene Ria Wolmarans, and as punishment, she will be mandatorily be placed on death row at Gaborone Central Prison under solitary confinement. Judge Aboahai stated, and I quote, "I have searched the trial records to find anything, however minute, to reduce your blameworthiness. I have not been able to find anything. The crime was carefully planned with the motive of enabling you to take over the husband of the deceased. It was committed with no mercy for the innocent victim. You desired to eliminate the deceased in order to be able to marry her husband. I have no doubt the crime was premeditated." When Judge Aboahai gave Mariette the chance to react to her statement, he pleaded her innocence and told the judge that he is guilty for sentencing a woman for something she did not do. "My sister, you knowingly participated in an affair with your best friend's husband. You borrowed a gun to shoot your best friend, and you married the same guy who you killed your best friend for. Your innocence is unfortunately non-existent, and you could have been manipulated into doing this. So you think that this is the end? Well, you'd be wrong. Very wrong." Sorry if you hear any rain in the background. I'm going to try and be as loud as I can because it started raining midway through the recording. But anyway, no sooner was Mariette convicted did she file an appeal to overturn the sentence. And this is where Mariette's trial, which was already the talk of Southern Africa at this point, got the attention of the Commonwealth. All thanks to Dini Wolmarans. Yes! Dini still believed that Mariette was innocent and that Henny Kutsia could have drugged her into doing this, or could have done this because he had something to do with Ria's murder. And Dini pulled out all the stops. He disintegrated the legal team led by advocate Luke, and he put together a new team for the appeal led by advocate Luke, and British barristers Desmond De Silva and Anne Schofield. My brother in Christ, British barristers? Are your pockets okay? Because that is an expense among expenses. Like, I can just imagine how high his legal fees were at this point. But then again, he's a desperate, insecure man who really thinks money will get his mistress turned wife exonerated from her sentence. So a small part of me isn't surprised, and it's just my opinion. Maybe you might think differently. I don't know. The judges part of the Botswana Appeals Court at the time comprised of 15 judges handpicked by the Commonwealth from countries like Britain, Scotland, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Nigeria, and they would sit twice a year to hear appeals from convicted criminals in Botswana. So Mariette had to endure a whole year of death row before she could get her appeal hearing. Her appeal trial began on mid-January 2001. And one thing the press noticed was that death row took a toll on Mariette when she appeared in court. She looked deathly skinny as she opted not to eat a lot in prison and lost a lot of weight as a result. And she looked much older than her age of 50 to 51 years. Like, look up her name online and you'll see, right? There's a difference between what she looked like during the trial and what she looked like during her appeal hearing. So, you know what I mean. During her time on death row, Mariette became a born-again Christian during that time, as she repented for her sins, which were about to be unraveled in court again. Botswana's Assistant Attorney General, Mr. Lizo Ngcongo, I hope I pronounced that correctly, but anyway, told the court that Mariette deserved the sentence she got due to a hidden jealousy of Ria and the fact that Charmaine and Soné had rejected court testimonies by Judge Bohai that clearly proved contradictions in Mariette's alibi at the time Ria was murdered, along with Aniki's posthumous testimony. However, Desmond De Silva and Anne Schofield claimed that Mariette wasn't given a proper sentence due to, you guessed it, Henny Coetzee granted immunity by Unora Mac if he testified against Mariette. Desmond De Silva also added that due to Mariette's low IQ and dependent personality disorder, she couldn't have committed Ria's murder on her own and may have been coerced by someone. Maybe it could be Henny, so that he could get out the embezzlement scandal scot-free yet again. Mariette may have also been coerced by Dini as well to commit the crime. Or anyone for that matter. Like, Mariette was not in her right state of mind. That's what Desmond De Silva was basically saying. Which is such a mad, but in a way, a slightly accurate statement. Especially around Dini. Given the following. 1. Dini got 200,000 pula out of Ria's life insurance policy. 2. Dini attempted to kill Ria by smothering her with a pillow, and he failed so bad that he attempted to kill himself. 3. The fact that Ria was almost done with divorcing Dini, and she wanted to get him out of her life, but unfortunately she was murdered before she could do so. 4. Dini possibly attempting to kill his own daughter, Marina, by drugging her and ensuring she dies in a car accident, because of the fact that Marina was starting to become suspicious, apparently. And 5, the fact that Dini is a charmer who used and manipulated Mariette into cheating on her husband before possibly ordering her to drug him before making the journey that would ultimately kill him. All because he wanted to be the man and husband that he could not in any way be around Ria, but of Mariette instead. This theory, on its own, could have exonerated Mariette, but was there any concrete proof to it? No. Therefore, the defense prayed that the appeal judges would be swayed by Desmond De Silva's theory. After 2 weeks, the appeal judges, who were led by Judge President Timothy Aguda from Nigeria, Sir John Blofeld from England, and Lord Weir from Scotland, deliberated for 2 hours before they came back with their decision. Mariette's appeal was denied, and her charges, along with her punishment, were still in place. All 3 judges described Mariette as a wicked and despicable woman in the process. So now, Mariette and Dini were more hopeless than they had imagined. And whereas Mariette began to accept her fate and focus on her religion with the time she's got left, Dini refused to give up, despite his legal fees skyrocketing to the stratosphere at this point. Dini began talking to Alice Mohwe, who is the director of human rights advocacy group Ditshwanelo, and the daughter of Archie Mohwe, who was one of Botswana's first ministers post its 1996 independence. Dini spoke to Alice in the hope that Ditshwanelo will help Mariette apply for clemency that would hopefully be granted by Festus Mogae, Botswana's 3rd president at the time. So if you're not sure about what clemency is basically just a pardon from the president, Just being like, listen, I committed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 crimes, but I would like to be exonerated because I feel like I've learned my lesson. I was not at the right state of mind at the time. And the president has the decision to either accept clemency or not. So anyway, Ditshwanelo, alongside other human rights groups around the world, vehemently opposed the death penalty. And remember, this case got a lot of attention internationally because of Mariette's sentence. And Botswana was pressured into making a decision because of the international uproar Mariette's case got. According to Alice, who appeared in a mini-series, Justice in a Line of Fire, Motive for Murder, and Huisgenut Warlewen's drama, there was an Italian human rights advocacy group called Hands Off Cain, looking to help Mariette overturn her conviction through the clemency application, so that she could get a life sentence instead. So Hands Off Cain called Alice and said, "Hey, we'd like to help." At the time of Mariette's conviction, Titsonelo was also assisting in another murder case involving two Basarwa men who were also facing the death penalty. And Alice told them, okay, we've got this case with Mariette Bosch Wolmarans at the moment, but we also got this case with the two Basarwa men. So can you also help us in ensuring that the two Basarwa men can also gain clemency? And Hands of Cain, let me just put it bluntly, they were not interested at all in the Basarwa case. They solely had their attention on Mariette, which to me, I believe, is an example of racial bias masked underneath, human rights and trying to save the world and all of that. The Basara are a very marginalized group of a dying language. And they're also scattered across southern Africa. And it's all because of, the effects of colonialism. And they're not being properly represented or cared for by the world. And it's very clear in this case because Hands of Cain wants to assist a white, affluent woman over two Basara men who were probably the only providers of their family over the same death penalty that all three of them got. Like, what? Like, look, there's so many things about this case which just stresses me, makes me feel outraged and angered because what the hell? At the same time, Dini was talking to Thabo Mbeki, who was still South Africa's president at the time, to help with gaining clemency for Mariette. And Mbeki accepted his request. However, South Africa was a bit slow because what happened next is very key. So pay attention. Titsonelo contacted advocate Brian Spilk in South Africa to help with the clemency application because Mariette complained that she wasn't truly represented well throughout her trial and appeal because nobody was fluent in Afrikaans in her legal team. So Titsonelo sought to rectify that. However, Spilk, just like almost everyone else, was concerned about the international interference in Mariette's case, as he stated these very words during his interview on Justice in a Line of Fire, Motive for Murder. And also, South Africa couldn't allow lawyers practicing in the country to assist in international clemency applications made by their citizens in other countries. And as a result of the setback, Titsonelo contacted Kafela, who was a local lawyer at the time, who also appeared on Justice in a Line of Fire, Motive for Murder. Kafela was brought in to help Mariette apply for clemency. And Alice and Kafela, they went to the prison that Mariette was at. And they met her and they described her as the nice, soft-spoken woman Mariette was described by all. Alice shared with Mariette about a dream in which she had prior to meeting Mariette, in which it was more or less a premonition that Mariette was going to die as a baby was born, symbolizing the fact that Mariette became born again. However, what Alice and Kafela didn't know was that this would be the first and last time they would see Mariette alive. Mariette's clemency was filed, and Festus Mogai, who was in London at the time, rejected Mariette's clemency, as he believed that there was nothing wrong with Mariette's sentencing, and believed that it was retribution for the murder that she committed. On Friday the 30th of March, 2001, Dini, along with Soné and Charmaine, traveled to the prison that Mariette was at so that they could visit her. However, they couldn't see her because the prison guards informed them that they were doing a surprise inspection because an inmate brought illegal contraband into the prison. So they were denied access as a result of this sudden inspection. And in the following morning of Saturday, the 31st of March 2001, at 5:30 a.m. to be specific, Mariette Bosch Wolmarans was hanged as per her death sentence, without a last meal and a family present to say goodbye, because they were denied at the last minute opportunity, basically. According to Western media, this execution was done in secret. But this was the case for Botswana that were hanged in the past, because Mariette was the 33rd person in Botswana to be executed since its independence around this time. She was also the 4th woman to be executed and the first white person to be executed in Botswana's judicial history. She was buried within the confines of the prison in an unmarked grave. The Bosches and the Wolmaranses, along with the entire country, found out about Mariette's execution on the 7 a.m. radio news telecast made by Radio Botswana the following Monday, just as the Bosch Wolmaranses were preparing to try and see Mariette again. Mariette's family, Dini, along with Ditonelo and her legal team, were shocked and devastated upon hearing of Mariette's execution. At the same time, Thabo Mbeki launched a petition to get clemency for Mariette from the Botswana government, not knowing that she was already dead. So I guess it was just way too late for Mbeki to do anything. Mariette's execution only escalated the uproar in the West once news of her death spread. Amnesty International, the biggest human rights advocacy group in the world, expressed their shock in one article that they wrote. In that article, they stated that the reason for their shock was because Mariette's family were not notified of her death first before the press, and that they were denied the chance to see her literally the day before she got executed. And just like Ditonelo, they sent a letter to Festus Mogai, urging him to accept the clemency application made by Mariette, stating in their letter, despite the view widely held that the death penalty is an especially effective means to prevent and punish violent crime, scientific studies have consistently failed to find convincing evidence that the death penalty deters crime more effectively than other punishments. Hell, even the UN, the United Nations, heard about this case and added it to the list of cases in their petition to get a worldwide ban on the death penalty, which got over 5 million signatures. Oh, and one thing to note, but guess who helped establish that petition? Hands Off Cain, the same Italian human rights advocacy group that only wanted to help Mariette gain clemency. But when they spoke to Ditonelo about wanting to assist Mariette gaining clemency, they didn't want to do the same thing for the Basoro men that Alice Mohoe and the entirety of Ditonelo told them about, the 2 Basoro men that were also charged with murder and also got the death penalty. So to say that this was a massive, massive blunder was an understatement. To this day, Hands Off Cain and Ditonelo still exist. Dini was angry at the Botswana prison service, for executing Mariette without his knowledge, and felt lied to as they called him to the prison where she was hanged to get her belongings and a farewell letter that she wrote a few days earlier. There was even an inquiry opened into the ethics of Mariette's execution, and Botswana's only blunder was that they did not notify the family about Mariette's execution first before putting it on radio and television. No law whatsoever was broken by the Botswana government in regards to Mariette's execution. And Mohai, along with the majority of Botswana at the time, didn't really care that much about the entire world's opinion of their use of the death penalty in Mariette's case, because they believed that despite her apparent wealth and the color of her skin, Mariette was not that special to them. And she killed someone at the end of the day, someone close to her, because of a love triangle. So, in short, Botswana thought the world over-exaggerated this execution, because many executions, like I said, were done in the past in the same style as Mariette's, and it would continue to remain that case, as to this very day, Botswana still practices the death penalty. In fact, Botswana is the only country in the SADC region to not abolish the death penalty. But given the fact that Duma Boko, Botswana's new president, is a human rights lawyer by trade, who consistently opposed the death penalty, that could change during the course of his presidency. So, what happened to Dini Wolmarans? Well, according to the miniseries Justice in the Line of Fire and Motive for Murder and other sources, he vacationed in Cape Town after Mariette's death with stepdaughter Soné, who was 16 years old at the time her mother got executed. Now, I'm going to have to give you a trigger warning because we're going to briefly discuss statutory rape right now. So if you are in any way triggered by sexual assault of any kind, be it recently or during your childhood, I'd advise for you to either skip this part or to contact the Botswana Gender-Based Violence Prevention and Support Center, Women Against Rape, and Childline Botswana, whose websites I'll link in the episode description, along with Childline Botswana's toll-free number. Now, it was alleged, yes, this is another rumor, but this could be true or not, I don't know. It was alleged that when Dini and Soné were on vacation together, their behavior felt subtly romantic, given that Dini was her stepfather. And it was believed that during the time of Mariette's imprisonment on death row, Dini and Soné began a sexual relationship of their own, even though she was 15 years old when it began. And Dini was over 3 decades her senior. Oh my lord. This is disgusting if you think about it. Because already we know Dini is such a horrible man and an even worse father figure. But in a way, I'm not surprised given that he abandoned his own daughters, Mariette's daughters, and may have even attempted to drag his daughter Marina and get her killed in a car accident. But still, this is just shocking, but not entirely surprising. Obviously, Dini denied all these allegations that he was in a relationship with Soné, despite the fact that she was a teenager at the time. And throughout the filming of Justice in the Line of Fire, Motive for Murder, Sanda Brensulu, remember, who hosted the show alongside co-host and well-known criminal profiler Mickey Pistorius, who even wrote a book explaining Fatal Woman, with Mariette being one of them. I forgot the name, but please try find it if you can. Tried to track Dini down, and when they finally did, they asked him questions about his side of the story in regards to the affair, Ria's murder, and Mariette's execution. And Dini stated that Mariette was confused, hinting that he still believes Henny Kutsia was responsible for Ria's death. He talked about the bullets found on Ria's body not being forensically tested, and when asked about his potential sexual relationship with Soné and his failed suicide attempt, the man just smiled and laughed before denying that he cheated on Mariette with Soné, nor that he tried to commit suicide after supposedly trying to smother Ria, stating that one day the truth shall be revealed. Oh God. I'm sure this man was reveling in the attention that he was getting at this point. And this gives off serious psychopathic traits. Because this man may have very well engaged in a very inappropriate relationship with his own stepdaughter, may have possibly coerced his second wife to kill his first wife. This man is a walking red flag. Like, you know, the green and red flag guy on Instagram. I'm sure that guy would grab like the biggest red flag that he would ever find and just fly it around and say, "Look, guys, this man is a walking red flag." Ever since, Dini's kept a low profile, along with what's left of the Bosch Wolmarans. Henny Kgosi refused to do interviews since the outbreak of this case, so we don't know whether Henny Kgosi may or may not have gotten away with embezzlement. But given the fact that this man was described as a clever guy, I think maybe he might have done it. Or maybe his reputation went to the toilet the minute Dini framed him. I guess we'll never know. So now we finally get to the final brew. What key takeaways can we get from this case? Well, 3 things. Firstly, this was a modern Shakespeare-level tragedy that even Shakespeare himself could have never ever written to that level if he was still alive. Mariette Bosch Wolmarans' case makes Measure for Measure, Othello, and King Lear look like a standard 3 school play. No soap opera writer could ever come up with something this close to the events of this case, because this case was bizarre, confusing, rumor-ridden, scandalous, mysterious, political, with a shade of racism, a pretty significant shade of racism, and also misogyny as well. This case was exhausting to research, and I'm probably sure you're glad that this is over now, just as much as I am. Because the one question I have, and probably you too at this point, is how on earth did this love triangle between 2 married couples in a quiet, posh suburb of Gaborone, Botswana, evolve into a debate that sparked worldwide concern into the ethics of the death penalty, especially in Botswana? I don't think there's any answer to that question. Not at all. Secondly, I believe that Dini Wolmarans may have gotten away with it. He wasn't properly investigated by the police. His flimsy alibi still stood. And given the guy's deplorable actions throughout, he sure talked his way out of trouble a lot of times. And probably wanted to let Mariette suffer the ultimate fate for his own greedy purposes deep down in his heart. It's very likely that Dini manipulated Mariette into a web he so wanted to form for the longest time. And it's unfortunate how African countries like ours still don't understand the importance of mental health, especially in cases like this. Dini was an obviously clear representation of toxic masculinity, while Mariette's IQ and dependent personality could have been addressed sooner in her childhood, rather than being left dormant, abandoned, and manipulated with. However, we cannot in any way leave out the third most important takeaway. No one won. Dini lost the woman he claimed to love. The Bosch and Wolmarans kids lost their mothers, and for the Bosch kids especially, they also lost their dad in the worst way possible. And despite so many attempts by all of the above-mentioned human rights advocacy groups, no one could reverse Mariette's ultimate fate, becoming a political martyr. But let's also not forget about the first and I believe the only true victim of this case, Maria Ria Wolmarans. Ria's mother lost her daughter. Ria's sisters lost their sibling. Ria's children lost their mother. And the suburb of Phakalane lost one of its most cherished residents, who was known all around for her no-nonsense, domineering, but loving, kind nature. All because she married the wrong man and trusted the wrong person so easily with her friendship and her life. May Ria's memory be not of a tragic murder, but of the lives she touched and impacted in her short life, and long may it continue. And that was the case of Maria Ria Wolmarans. A very sad and a very long case, which for me reminds me about the importance of true, genuine friendship and how all of that can just change in an instant. That's why for me, I like to just keep my social circle small and prioritize my family over my friends. Like personally, I don't have a best friend, and I don't ever wish to have a best friend, because it feels like you're favoring one person with everything you want them to know about you, like all your sensitive information. And they would want something from you, and they could let you down immensely. And I hope that I don't get let down in the same way that Ria was let down by Mariette. And I hope none of you also go through the very same pain, because losing a romantic relationship is tough, but losing a friendship you loved and cherished is a lot worse, if you ask me. So I think that, not really needing a best friend, like an external best friend in your life, is really all that necessary, Should be normalized, I think. Because I think that at the end of the day, everyone should be their own best friend first, before they invite others into their lives, so that they can tell who's right for them and who's not right for them. Because Mariette and Dini pulled the wool over Ria's eyes, and unfortunately, Ria's not alive to tell the tale. So, yeah. Anyway, if you enjoyed this episode, which I apologize if it was really long, but if you enjoyed this episode, please comment below, share, like, and follow CrimeBrew on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And also follow CrimeBrew's Instagram, X, and Facebook pages, along with my personal Instagram, which I'll link below. Next month, we'll be delving into another popular case in Botswana, because it's unsolved and it involves witchcraft. So hopefully it's going to be a much shorter episode, and I want you to guess the case that I'll be delving into next month in the comment section below. But until then, was Mariette really a schemer? Or was she just a naive pawn? Did Dini Wolmarans or Henny Kutsia commit Ria's murder? Do you think justice was truly served for the Bosch and Wolmarans' families? Because I don't think so on both sides. Remember, I said nobody won. And do you think that in Botswana, is it about time that we seriously begin discussing the abolishment of the death penalty in the next few years? Should the death penalty be abolished? Let me know. But until then, continue brewing your cups of tea, Bahaitso, and I'll see you in February for the next episode of Crime Brew with Kgosi Tau-Bantsi.